Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third in the Expert at Elmwood series this year. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Just some quick housekeeping before we start. There will be an opportunity for you to ask Rachel some questions this evening. So if you pop your questions in the chat or the Q&A, we will be making sure that those are answered towards the end. Just another announcement is that this will be recorded. So if you miss anything or you get interrupted during the evening by children or whatever, it's going to be recorded so you can watch it back. Just wanted to first of all say that Rachel and Elmwood have this really special relationship. We're just talking about it, about this mutual almost love for each other. It's the third time she's visited us, and I remember the last time she was here really fondly. It was my first experience of working with Rachel, and she was with us to talk about her book at the time, which was The Curse of the Good Girl. The thing that really struck me about Rachel was her genuine nature. I love it when people are really genuine and really open and really honest, and her passion for girls and girls learning. But also it was just this personal attachment she made with everyone she met that day, with the girls and with parents on the evening. Personally, I learned a huge amount that day about myself as a father of a daughter, but also as a person. There was a lot of kind of learning that came to me about things that I maybe should do differently or should just try. And as I've done those, things have definitely improved. Rachel has been on the front line of girls' education for a long time, not only as a researcher, but also working in those organizations that deal directly with girls. She's a co-founder of the Girls Leadership Organization, and she is the author of a number of books. Tonight, she's here to talk to us about her newest book, Enough as She Is, and how we can all help girls navigate our achievement and expectation-oriented culture to become the best versions of themselves. I was looking around her website earlier and I love this quote. It's a deeply urgent book that gives adults the tools to help girls reject supergirl pressure, overcome a toxic stress culture, and become resilient adults with healthy, happy, and fulfilling lives. You are in for a treat this evening, and I would like to welcome Rachel back to our family, and I hope you'll enjoy the evening. Over to you, Rachel. You're on mute.
Well, that's not a very auspicious beginning. Thank you so much for that absolutely lovely introduction. And as you may have heard, the feeling is completely mutual. I have traveled to so many different schools all over this world, and I have such a fond memory of Elmwood. I was just remarking on, for the most part, I'm not too disappointed to get to stay at home these days, having spent 20 years on the road, but I would have very much liked to be with you in person. I just have such a great memory of the vibe and the warmth at Elmwood. So in lieu of me being there, at least we can hang out here now. So tonight I want to talk to you about what I think is a terrible trade-off that so many girls feel forced to make. And that is, so many feel like they have to give up their wellness and their self-worth in the pursuit of success. And one of my missions in this world is to try to prevent that trade-off, to try to help girls find a way to navigate success without giving up themselves. And so my hope tonight is to give you some strategies to do that. I also, just by way of introduction, if you haven't seen me talk before, I'm an educator. That's kind of, I wear a lot of hats, but that's definitely my core self. And by that, I mean, I want to be really practical with you tonight. So I'm going to be throwing out a lot of strategies, not doing a ton of talking about problems. And I also want to say, speaking of strategies, that the older your child is, for those of you, as parents on the call tonight, the more prone to eye rolling they may be. Just by way of introduction, I have an 8-year-old daughter who has an entire language that can be just called the language, and the and so as those nonverbals increase, you may find that some of the strategies I'm going to suggest may be met with an or whatever. I want to be clear that the older kids get, just because they are responding that way does not mean they're not listening. And certainly as we get into adolescence, you're not going to have a kid who says, "Thank you so much for taking the time to explain X and Y to me." They may look at you like you're crazy or not say anything at all to you. But one of the things we know about kids is that they sometimes connect by pushing back, but that they are still listening. So I want to kind of encourage you to stay the course and give some of my strategies a chance, because you might be like, I don't know about that, Rachel Simmons. But their job isn't to be psyched about our suggestions. Their job is to sometimes be in tension with them, but they are still listening. Okay, so let's get into it. I want to talk about a couple different, just to set this up, like what's the frame that our girls are growing up in? What's the context? So I want to just name at least two issues. One of them is what I call the college application industrial complex. And this is, of course, the insane and unfair pressure that all our kids are subject to as they get closer to university. It's the pressure to craft yourself into the most perfect specimen for college admission. And you know how this goes. This is like if you don't solve a cure a major disease in your science fair project in middle school, or carry a child out of a burning building by the time you're in 11th grade, grade 11, you're destined for a life of mediocrity. So it kind of goes something like that. I poke fun at it, but I think the expectations push girls into a kind of never-ending pursuit of trying to be better and better, and in turn, a sense that nothing they can do is ever enough. And I don't want to spend too much time on that, because I think well the incredible stress that pressure causes. Here's the second thing I want to point out to you, and I'm going to share my screen off and on. I do prefer to mostly just talk to you, but occasionally I will use a visual aid. Let me find my visual aid for you. Okay, so I want to show you this image, which to me gets at the competing expectations that our girls are facing. And so, one of the things that psychologists have identified is a phenomenon called role overload. And this is when a person has too many roles to play in a single day, and it causes an enormous amount of stress. As somebody who works with adults as well, it's not just girls who experience the many different kinds of roles that they have to play in a given day, but adult women as well. This has become even more pronounced, by the way, in a pandemic. In addition to role overload, we also have role conflict, which is when the roles that you're expected to play don't support each other. And in fact, cause one, when you're trying to fulfill one role, it takes away from the other. So what does this mean practically? Well, when you ask a group of girls what are the different roles that they play, they'll say, I have to be really good at school. I probably have to be athletic on some level. I'm also expected to be a really good friend and a participating member of my family. And I need to be on social media. And as they get older, I need to be pretty woke, meaning kind of socially conscious and connected. And there's a sense that I have to be all these things to all people. That girls were told, and this is a quote that I'm going to mangle, but girls were told that they should try to be anything in this world, but they heard that they had to be everything, right? We said you could be anything, but they heard we have to be everything. Now, let me put this in a different context for you. If you think about the old expectations that we used to have on our girls growing up, really old school stuff, right? It was about being nice and being attractive and being polite. When we gave girls access to all of these new opportunities, right? We said, like, you want to go be an engineer, be an engineer. You want to be a fighter pilot, be a fighter pilot. You want to play a sport that's never been played before by a girl, do it. We didn't say, don't worry about the bikini body. We didn't say, don't worry about having to be friends with everyone or liked by everyone. What we said was, we're going to take all of these new expectations and we're going to lump them on what we've already given you to deal with from before. And that's why girls and many women navigate the competing pressure to be liked by everyone and to be nice to everyone, but also to be ambitious and a winner and somebody who constantly strives for success. They're told their bodies have to look a particular way, a very specific way, and they're also told they have to be scholars who work all the time towards their academic goals. They're told that they should be thinking big and planning for their future, but they also feel the pressure to respond as they get older and have access to social media to every single notification that comes through on their phone, lest their friends think they're mad at them for not replying instantaneously. So if that tires you out, just listening to me talk about these obligations, that's what we mean by role overload. But again, it's not that we revisioned or we didn't revise the expectations for girls when we gave them access to all of these new opportunities. We just lumped all the new onto the old. And that is why girls, I believe, one of the reasons why adolescent girls get the least amount of sleep in the United States of any other group. I don't know how it is in Canada, but adolescent girls in particular are the least well-slept group of people in the United States. Okay, so I want to now get into what some of the messages about success that our girls are hearing look like. And it's important to me that, like, I just want to say to you, kind of parent to parent, I think one of the best things you can do for your kid, especially as she gets closer to that college pressure point, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but like, feel like grade 5 and 6 girls are starting to talk about the pressure to get into college, which blows my mind if you have a daughter who's already tapping into that. So, really important, parent to parent, I want you to try to take a stand against some of that. I want you to say to them, like, that's not actually a healthy way to be in this world, or the pressure that you are facing, that you feel like you have to be perfect all the time. That's totally messed up. That's not fair. That's not healthy, and that we're going to have to figure out what we stand for and who we want to be as a family in the midst of that. Another way of saying this, and I can tell you that when I talk with particularly with high school girls about this, it can be really powerful, is to basically say to them, listen, the pressure that you're feeling right now, that is not your fault. You may feel like you can't keep up. You may feel like everyone else is doing better than you. And have you noticed, if you have like a middle or high school girl, sort of grade 7 and up, they start to just assume that everyone is doing better than they are in school. They have that, there's this like mass hallucination that all my friends are, have better social lives. They are excelling better. They're going to go to better universities. So you may think all of those things are true, but you have to understand this isn't your fault, that this is a really broken culture. By saying these things to your daughter, you are positioning yourself against the messaging. And I recognize that she may not pay attention to you, right? Some of you are listening going, I've been saying this and she just does her own thing. Of course, because you can create the Garden of Eden in your own house, but she still has to go out there and deal with all those messages from the mainstream world. It doesn't matter. You still want to keep saying that. You want to take the stand against it. One quick piece of advice, please don't tell her that she's putting too much pressure on herself. All right. Because again, like, I recognize that you may want her to be really happy and you don't know where all this kind of craziness you're seeing in her is coming from. It's coming because she lives in a world where the mainstream message is you have to be amazing at everything that you do. Right. So it's not that she's putting pressure on herself. It's that she's breathing the toxic air that's telling her that nothing she can do is ever enough. So try to avoid the like, we just want her to be happy. Why is she putting so much pressure on herself? It's a minor point, but it annoys them. And so you could just like get yourself out of that situation and get some points. Okay. So let's get into this message of being amazing at everything you do. Because if you have a daughter who feels that way, you're going to have to spend some time kind of chiseling away at that. So this is what I say to the girls. There are two reasons why being amazing at everything you do is totally problematic. The first is if you expect yourself to be amazing all the time at everything you do, you will inevitably feel like you're not good enough because you will always set the bar too high. You will always be trying to aspire to something beyond you. So you will always feel like I'm not smart enough or pretty enough or athletic enough, because amazing is a line that no one ever really gets to cross, right? So there will always be a constant sense of self-criticism. How do we combat that, by the way? Really important to try to practice gratitude with your daughter. And, you can do this at breakfast. What are 3 things that are good about our lives right now? You can do this in a text. You can do this in a moving vehicle with the doors locked, which is a great time to bring up stuff. But you can just encourage your daughter to remember what's good right now, because the never ending treadmill of not enough makes it very hard for them to remember what is enough. And gratitude is like an anchor that you drop into enoughness that says, right now, these things make life enough. So, feeling like you have to always be amazing leaves you in that constant sense of self criticism. Here's the other problem with feeling like you need to be amazing all the time. You stop taking risks. And I gotta say, one of the best things you can do with your daughter is to try to help her leave her comfort zone as much as she can. Why? Because when your daughter can leave her comfort zone, it means that she can handle situations where she's not sure what's going to happen. And that's not only going to make her more resilient, it's going to make her tougher, but it's going to expand her sphere of learning far beyond what it would be if she was always playing it safe. So what do you mean by playing it safe? Well, the reality is if you're told to be perfect all the time, why would you possibly put yourself in a situation where you're going to fail? Why would you possibly take a class where you know you might not get an A, or pursue an activity where you might not excel? Because you're being programmed by that toxic culture to constantly be amazing. But think about what is lost when we end up playing it safe. So we really want to encourage that risk taking. One of the ways that you can do this is to try to think about it in terms of two types of goals that your daughter might be pursuing. So I'm going to tell you a little story about myself. Are you ready for story time? Um, it's always weird when I can't see your faces and I'm just looking at myself. Does everybody want to see my dog? Does everyone see my dog? This is what he thinks of my speaking. Sorry, I just need to make a quick joke. Puts him right out. So he had a hard day at the office, my business partner. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little story about myself. So when I was 24 years old, I won a Rhodes Scholarship. Rhodes Scholarship entitles the winner to up to 3 years of fully funded study at Oxford University. I went from New York in the US, where I lived at the time. I'm going to tell you two versions of this story to teach you about the different types of goals that your daughter might pursue. Very prestigious, by the way, this Rhodes Scholarship. Get lots of attention for it. It's considered sort of a free pass almost to Yale Law School and to lots of successful experiences. So if you're wondering, by the way, why I'm bragging, this doesn't end well. So I'll give you the whole story. So in one scenario of me winning the Rhodes Scholarship, I might have gone to Oxford because I really was interested in studying political theory, because there were particular professors there who I wanted to study with and who I knew could give me an experience of education in that area that I couldn't get anywhere else. I would go to Oxford because I really wanted to be in England, and that was a meaningful place to me, because it was important for me to experience some aspect of the Rhodes Scholarship that I had learned about. To do that would be to pursue a learning goal. What's a learning goal? A learning goal is when you go after something because you really care about it, because you really want to know the answer to a question, because you're curious, because you have a skill that you want to master. But you know what? That wasn't the reason I went to Oxford. The second version, which is the correct version, is that I applied for the Rhodes Scholarship because I wanted to win the Rhodes Scholarship, because I knew how amazing it would look if I could win such a prestigious award, because I knew that it would probably gain me passage to a fabulous law school, and because it felt really good to be the best, and that's what I wanted to be. And so when I got to Oxford, what ended up happening was I became very depressed. I didn't like it there because the sun went down at 4 o'clock in the afternoon every day, and it rained all the time, and people put mayonnaise on hard-boiled eggs, which was deeply troubling, but really it was. I felt just not a match. I ended up dropping out of Oxford. I ended up, the president of my college told me that I had brought shame on on our college by dropping out. All of this is to say, this is a story I always tell the girls. The whole point was I was pursuing a performance goal. A performance goal is when you try to do something because of the affirmation that you will get or because you want to avoid failure, but you don't do it because of what drives you. What I'd like you to think about with your own daughter is how many of the goals that she is pursuing are learning goals that she's doing it to master something. She's doing it because she's intrinsically driven. And how much of what she's doing is a performance goal because she's looking for external affirmation. You can ask her questions like, tell me why you're doing this thing. Are you doing it because you care? Are you doing it because you think you have to? Are you doing this because you want to? Or are you doing it because you think we want you to? She may say, I don't know, I'm fine. Yes, it's no big deal. Keep asking those questions because you want to give her that lens onto the world that says that she should pursue the things for which she feels a sense of purpose and drive. That, of course, to some extent, everyone's got to do stuff they don't want to do. Of course, they will have to have some performance goals, but we also want them to, at least some of the time, be pursuing the things that are meaningful to them. People who pursue performance goals, like myself, are less resilient, meaning they're more likely to drop out of Oxford and the Rhodes Scholarship when things don't go well. And the reason why they're less resilient is because they don't have something to fight for. They don't care enough about it to stick it out. The people who have learning goals are much more likely to stick with what they're doing, and they're much more likely to report a sense of happiness and fulfillment about what they're doing. Needless to say, political theory and law school were not what I ended up doing. It all worked out, and I was lucky for that. So I want to talk quickly now about the pandemic and what your parenting may want to look like during this moment with your daughters. So I do a whole talk right now on pandemic parenting, and I want to quickly just give you some snapshots from that because I think it's really hard to talk about anything right now without mentioning that. So first of all, I think right now we are experiencing many of us, a level of fatigue around the constant living with stress, with uncertainty, with things changing. We're in lockdown. No, we're not. We're on Zoom. No, we're not. That creates a kind of tiredness that maybe we wouldn't have seen before. So a lot of us, like you may notice you get tired in the beginning of the day or in the middle of the day or at weird times that you didn't get before. You may notice that your kids kind of poop out in ways that they hadn't before. I would like for you to show them some flexibility and grace in this space. What I call it in my own house is trying energy. Are you running low on trying energy? Which means you might be doing something that you've been doing your whole life, but all of a sudden it feels really exhausting to do it. So if you're noticing that in your own house, name it. If your trying energy is running low, take a rest. So part of what I'm asking you to do is recognize that even if your kids are doing the same things they were doing before, there is a level of exertion that is required to adapt to changing circumstances that leads them to be more tired, more worn out, more easily worn out. Name it and encourage them to take a rest, to stop, and try to be comfortable when they ask for that, when they need that space to just recharge. Another thing to think about is if something is not working in your daughter's pattern at home, let it go. So you want to try to be as flexible as you can as a parent right now. For some of you, flexibility is your jam. For others of you, not your jam, right? Rigidity is your thing. That's kind of how you have been disciplined, how you've made things like be efficient. Right now, rigidity in parenting does not serve us. So you can ask yourself questions and ask your daughter questions if she's old enough to talk with you about it. Like, what's not working for us? Like, let's think about how the last few days have gone. What do we think is working? What do we think isn't working? What do we want to let go of? What do we want to keep doing? If you can try to have these conversations with your daughter regularly, you can even do it in note form. If you have a kid who likes to write notes or text, do it that way. Open the channel, show that you're being flexible, obviously be willing to follow through. Let her know that this is a time where you welcome her suggestions about how to do things differently. I'm not suggesting she doesn't do what she needs to do, just that you want to model some flexibility at a moment of stress. The last thing I want to say about kind of pandemic life is that we really want to validate how our kids are feeling. And so to let them know it's totally okay to be anxious. It's okay to feel worried and frustrated about the uncertainty of life right now. Part of this is what's called psychological flexibility. The term is psychological flexibility, and it really means, among other things, recognizing that discomfort is a feature of life. It's not a bug of life. And for those of you, everybody grows up in a different kind of family with respect to talking about feelings. Some of you maybe grew up in houses where your family spoke openly about emotions. Others of you did not. So the pandemic is a time where, trying to kind of put uncomfortable emotions away or sweep them under the rug or kind of keep a stiff upper lip has become really difficult. And so the families that tend to be doing a little bit better are the ones that say, it's okay to feel however you need to feel. It's not okay to do whatever you want to do. It makes sense if you're struggling right now, right? Riding the struggle bus is a thing that a lot of people are doing. And this is part of life. And we're not going to make these feelings go away right now. We're going to have to live with them. Sometimes we're going to be okay. We're not going to like all our feelings, but we have to deal with those feelings as opposed to, right? Like everything's going to be fine. It's going to be okay all the time. All right. Some other things that I want to encourage you to do, excuse me. You can ask your child when they are struggling, would you like advice or do you want me to just listen? Would you like advice or do you want me to just listen? You're not allowed to ask this question if you do not know how to just listen. I always say that with my mother in mind because my mother life coaches everyone. Like she's just listening is not the thing that she does. Like she life coaches like the Uber driver and like she doesn't just listen. So you can only ask that question, do you want my advice or do you want me to just listen? Or you could say, do you want to just vent? And then you got to stick with it. And sometimes your kids just need to discharge, right? Sometimes if you have a kid in university, excuse me, one of the things that they do, I until recently worked at Smith College, right near my house here, where I live in Massachusetts in the U.S. They will call their parents like hysterical, crying about how awful college is, and just discharge and discharge, and then they hang up the phone and they're fine, and the parent is gutted for the remainder of the night. So, or the next 2 days. Sometimes your child just needs to like put all of their negative feelings into you. It's one of the, frankly, most insufferable parts of parenting. And sometimes our job is to just be the repository and let them vent, let them discharge those negative feelings. I don't have any great strategies for dealing with that, except like exercise, take a walk, call a friend, have a glass of wine. But recognize that the older your child gets, the less they are looking for you to solve their problems. And the older they get, like they actually, my theory is they know sooner than we do that we can't solve their problems. And actually, what they really want from you most of the time is empathy. What does empathy sound like? And if you're sitting there being like, really, Rachel Simmons, empathy? Yeah. In my research, what I found was that girls, the number one thing they wanted from parents and teachers was just to be told that their feelings were okay, that they weren't crazy for feeling what they felt. Empathy doesn't cost very much, but it is often one of the hardest things for parents to do. Why? Because think about it. I mean, sitting with the anguish of your child, because that's what empathy is, right? Empathy is just trying to kind of imagine the feelings of someone who is suffering, or in a compassion is also part of that, and not acting. As parents, we're totally wired to fix them, right? Or to fix their situation, to sit calmly and quietly with the anguish of our children and not act is one of the greatest acts of service that you can do for your child. It's also one of the hardest. And it's the thing they want. They just want to know that you understand and that their feelings make sense. So please understand, the older that they get, that is really what they crave. All people want that, right? Like, doesn't matter how old they are, but the older that they get, the more that's the thing that you're going to be able to do most for them. The younger that they are, like, the younger they are, the easier it is to change, to like do things with their life, right? Like you can shape their world when they're younger. As they get older, we lose that capacity. So if empathy is not something you grew up with, and I can say it's not something I grew up with in my family, it is something you can learn to do. It is something you can practice. And what it sounds like with your child is, it really makes sense to me that you feel, and then you say the emotion word. Like, I really understand why you feel so stressed or worried. If I were you, I would feel frustrated too, or I would feel really disappointed. I am sorry. sometimes the best thing you can do for somebody is just to sit with them and help them understand that, like I said, there's nothing wrong with them for feeling the way that they feel and that you're there with them and that you love them. And sometimes that is all that they want. Consider trying that the next time you want to solve, and see how it goes. So I want to talk now about how we can cultivate risk taking. And by the way, I do want to encourage questions. So Elmwood, don't let me down because I expect really smart questions. Just kidding, no pressure. That would be to repeat what I'm doing. But I do expect questions from you, and you can put them in the chat. But I'm hoping you came here tonight with questions because that's my favorite part of the talk. That and showing you my dog. So I want to talk to you about risk taking. All right. I want to talk to you about how do we help our kids be more comfortable with discomfort. Because here's the deal, right? Like nobody gets to grow without feeling some degree of discomfort. And you can say this to your daughter. This is actually called having a positive stress mindset. A positive stress mindset is when you can look at stressful situations as having potentially positive consequences, right? And research shows that people who have a positive stress mindset tend to be more productive, they have more energy, they even die later. This is true. Kind of wild, but true. And so when you can look at a stressful situation as kind of an essential part of growth, sort of like I said earlier, like anxiety and stress are a natural part of life, but also they're a part of growth. So if we didn't have any stress in our lives, life would be really boring and we probably wouldn't change. Like nobody gets to transform in any way without passing through some stress and discomfort. So I want to introduce you to a kind of three-step system. I'm going to share my screen with you again. Let us see. No, that's not what I want. Sorry. Hang on. I am screen sharing. Thank you. I can see that. Let's see. Sorry, everyone. This is not my favorite skill set. Present. Okay. Nope, that's not what it is. Here we go. All right. So at the top, here's the 3 steps. This is a very expensive system. I'm just joking. It involves drawing 3 circles. And I want to show you a way that you can cultivate risk-taking in your daughter. So, okay, at the top, you see a girl has a goal that scares her. And in this situation, it's telling a friend that she's upset with her. So you may know that oftentimes confrontation is really challenging. It's a risk. It feels like something for some girls that is terrifying. Okay, so 3 circles. You can draw them right now if you want. The inner circle is called your comfort zone. The comfort zone, this is me talking to a girl, and you can do this with your own daughter. I would say, okay, so you want to tell a friend what's upset, that you're upset with her. Tell me what you're doing right now about that comes really easily to you. Like that's your comfort zone. That's the thing that's not that hard for you to do. So what she said is doing nothing is what I'm doing. And obviously like feeling resentful. Important to tell your daughter that doing nothing is a choice, because sometimes you'll say to your daughter, like, what do you want to do about that? And she'll be like, nothing. And you can say, okay, nothing is a strategy. Now, the inner circle of these 3 circles is called, it says small step that makes me nervous. Okay. So if you've been at all not focusing, here's a really good part of the talk that you can take with you. As somebody who occasionally zones out. Okay, so you know that saying, do something every day that scares you, the Eleanor Roosevelt quote, I'm sure, or I think it's like, do something that scares you every day. I think you know what I'm talking about. So I want to challenge that for you. In fact, think about it. Like, do you actually want to be scared every day? I personally do not want to be scared every day, although I will say living in the United States, I've been experiencing that recently, and I can just tell you, I don't recommend it. So instead of doing something that scares you every day, the way that people are way more likely to accomplish their goals is by doing something that makes them slightly nervous, but not terrified. We call this the sphere of desirable difficulty. So this is the sweet spot between something that feels really, really scary and too easy. It's right in the zone of halfway between scary and easy. It's something that makes you nervous. So what I said to this girl, and what will you say to your daughter, is something that could get you closer to your goal of telling your friend that you're upset with her, that makes you nervous, but not terrified. And she said that it was writing down what she wanted to say. She was going to write a letter basically to her friend. She wasn't ready to talk to her, but she was ready to write down her thoughts. The last question I asked is, tell me something that really terrifies you, that brings you closer to that goal, but you are not ready to do it. She said, practicing what I want to say to a parent or my pet, because obviously pets are incredible listeners. Um, those are the 3 steps. Now, what is the point of doing it this way? Because when they accomplish that small step that makes them nervous, they are so jazzed and it's doable and they feel satisfied and they feel excited to try something again. Then the small step that made them nervous now becomes their comfort zone. And the big scary step feels a little bit closer to them. This is actually how progress happens. It's not by swinging for the fences and carrying the child out of the burning building. Recognize that the message that they get from that kind of mainstream culture that tells them to be amazing all the time is that they just have to immediately tell their friend that they're upset with them. That's just not how change happens. So you want to break this down for them. May I make a suggestion? Do this with them. When I left New York City and I moved up here to New England, it was very cold and the restaurants weren't good. I'll just be honest. And so I had to learn how to cook. I used these 3 circles to learn how to cook, right? My comfort zone was like making reservations, la, 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 have funny, right? But like I had to bit by bit learn how to cook, learn how to host people. What risk do you want to take? Could you use this system? I use the system with adults all the time. Do it with your daughter. Reward yourselves when you go and take that small step that makes you nervous. Make it fun. I've been doing this for 20 years. It absolutely works. Here are some questions I want you to ask your daughter when she's considering a risk or facing a setback. And that is, what's the worst that can happen? Can you deal with that? What are 3 ways you can still win, even if you don't get what you want? So let's say you talk to your friend, you tell her why you're upset, and she doesn't handle it well. Her reaction is exactly the opposite of what you were hoping for. What are 3 ways you still win? And you know what most girls would say? Well, I proved to myself that I could do it. That's 1. That I was brave enough. Number 2, I told my friend what I really thought. And I'm glad I told her. And number 3, my friend showed me who she really was and kind of gave me a message about the kind of person that they are. Why do we ask our daughters, how would you still win even if you didn't get what you want? Because we want them to understand that life isn't all about the outcome and the result, that life and its gifts happen in the journey and happen in the process. This is one of the most precious things you can teach your child. And you can do this in all kinds of ways. Something doesn't, you don't get what you want in front of them. You burned dinner. You got lost and you made it too late to an appointment. Whatever it is, you screw up. Okay. If you're a human parent, you're screwing up plenty in front of your kids. Articulate to them, well, at least this good thing came out of it. Model to them that in every letdown, there is always meaning to be made. There is always something we can pull from it. And if you can't figure it out in the moment, come back to them later and tell them what it was. Last question, why did this matter to you in the first place? Why'd you take this risk to begin with? Why was it important to you? When our kids know why something matters to them, it goes back to the learning goals. They're much more willing to fight for it. So the last couple things that I want to share before I open the floor to questions. First of all, it's really important, and I've already sort of begun talking about this, that you remember how you, I'm going to put it this way. I'm going to talk about modeling for a second. So remember when they're learning to walk, and do you remember when they face plant, when they're learning how to walk? Do you remember the very first thing that they do? They look at us, right? And they look at us because they're looking to see our reaction. And if you went like, bah, then they flipped out. But if you were like, you're good, you got this, and you kind of picked them up and helped them along, they went trucking away. That same transaction is happening now. Meaning your daughter doesn't do athletically perform the way that she or you wanted her to. She doesn't academically perform the way she or you wanted her to. She's looking at your face. She is. She wants to know, should I freak out or shouldn't I? So please know that the way that you react is going to shape how she reacts. And what's so annoying about girls, and I say this with love, is that they're little seismographs. Like, they read our moods. I swear to God, I feel like if my voice changes a little bit, my daughter's like, why are you upset? I'm like, oh my God, stop monitoring me. It's real. Like, girl research shows tend to be more sensitive to people's facial gestures, to moods. So it means that we need to keep ourselves in check. It means we need to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. Now, how do you do that? Here's the thought. When you experience the disappointment, as we all invariably do, of watching our children fall short of whatever standard we expected them to attain, I know for me, and I know I'm not alone, that my mind can sometimes run away with itself. I see my daughter fall short, and I can begin in my head to start fantasizing about terrible things. So if I'm watching her, for example, and I have to be honest with you all, and I'm just going to be honest, and I'm going to make a reference to a cartoon that some of you may know and some of you may not, but it's South Park, which actually had a really whole funny thing about Canadians. But anyway, Eric Cartman, the character in South Park, and if you don't know him, you don't need to. He's just kind of a nasty little boy. The voice in my head that tells me terrible things are going to befall my daughter happens in Eric Cartman's voice. So let's say she's not focusing on something that I want her to focus on. In my head, I start to go, maybe she's not going to be able to focus on any of her learning. Maybe she won't go to a good college. Maybe she won't have a good job. And I start to spin out in my head. And I really hope some of you are laughing and then I haven't made a complete fool out of myself talking about Eric Cartman. I can't really see your faces. But anyway, the point is, when we panic about our children, when we worry, not just about what we're watching in front of our faces, but what it means for the future, what's going to happen to them, what if, that is when we panic from fear. That is when we panic in in a way that we will not be proud of. So the question I want you to ask yourself, as you feel that anxiety start to grow, as you start to react in a way to their disappointing you in some way, and they will, that you know isn't going to be read well by them, I want you to ask yourself a question, and that is, how would I parent if I was not afraid? How would I parent if I knew she was going to be fine? If I knew this was going to work out? If I knew this was a phase? I guarantee you two things. One, if you ask yourself that question and you really consider the answer, you will parent in a way that you are much more proud of than if you parent from panic. Second thing is, you're probably going to say and do a lot less. You're going to back off. You're just going to be like, it's going to be good. I don't need to say anything. Because often what we say is coming from that sense of panic and anxiety. And sometimes leaving it be, letting it lie, is exactly what they need in order to work through whatever they're working through. So how would I parent if I wasn't afraid? I want to pause here. I see we've got some questions in the chat. And I'd really love to open the floor now to conversation with you. I've got plenty more I can talk about, but I want to make sure that we leave time here. So Megan, do you want to read to me the questions that you'd like me to focus on?
I would love to. Thank you so much, Rachel. I will save the proper formal thank you for the very end, but really enjoyed listening to you. I remember now your sense of humor, you couldn't see the faces, but I was laughing, and I'm sure
Yeah.
other people were too. And the great kind of narrative and the stories really bring your talk to life. So we were laughing.
All right, cool.
But also getting some really helpful practical strategies and tips, and a couple of questions kind of following on from that. So one of the questions is around, and I think when we think about this idea of being enough and the impact of social media, and how during this pandemic, sometimes social media is a safe way for the girls and for our children to stay connected. However, we're also aware of some of the negative impacts of social media, and in particular, there's been a lot of bad press around things like TikTok, Instagram, things like that, that the girls are using to stay connected. So what would your recommendations be around, keeping girls off social media? Do you let them use it? How do you monitor? Should you monitor? What would you say about all of that?
A few of those questions. So here's what I think. Actually, I love this topic. So what we know is that the kids who become the most skillful users of social media have what are called mentor parents when it comes to technology. So in other words, the kids who are kind of cold turkey kept off of it, and cold turkey isn't the right phrase, but just thinking about something else recently related to cold turkey and technology, but who are sort of kept off of it because it's seen as like a scourge. Those are the ones who, when they get access, actually are more likely to act out or misuse the technology. So it's the kids whose parents are playing an active role in introducing it to them, in processing it with them, talking with them about the fact that it's not that social media is all good or all bad, it's how you use it that can be the good or the bad, but it's not the very fact of it that is the problem. So my suggestion is, actually, the earlier in some ways you introduce them to it, the better. But you say a couple of things. One, that the access to social media is a privilege and not a right, meaning like, for example, when my daughter, who since the age of 4 has been asking for a phone, I basically say, like, it's going to be like getting a driver's license. Like, you're going to have to really prove that you're responsible enough to use it. You're going to have to show me that you know how to do certain things and that I can trust you. And what does trust mean? It means that you're going to make the right choice even when I'm not there. And also I'm going to be monitoring it, but that's a whole other thing. But the point is that you want them to understand that it's not just something you get. And secondly, you talk to them about it. So you can look at Instagram with them and say, God, I feel really uncomfortable with how this celebrity is dressed. Like, I wonder why she feels like she needs to be half naked in order to like express herself. And then I say, and just to give you a sense of what I say, some people think that that's really powerful. Some women think it's really powerful to not dress, like not put on a lot of clothes because they're really proud of their bodies. But some people think that, like, why, and you can actually look at celebrities, some celebrities that wear more clothes and some celebrities that don't. Introduce your daughter to a dialogue about what you're looking at. You can share your values and also be open to letting her develop her own. But if you teach her some literacy as she's accessing it, then you're giving her the tools to be critical of what she consumes. So you can say, hey, it's totally great that you like that. I feel kind of uncomfortable with, like, what's she doing with her butt there? I mean, obviously I have like an 8-year-old, so I'm giving you my example, but you can also have a fair conversation like with your kid about what you're consuming, because you want your daughter to be a critical consumer of social media. You want to give her that, but that's what she's learning at Elmwood. She's learning to be a thinker, right? To challenge, to think critically about what she sees. Bring that to her when it comes to social media as well. And don't be afraid of it. Really don't be afraid of it. You have all the tools you need. If you make technology something scary and exceptional, then it will be so much harder for you as a parent to come into it with your daughter.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Those are great suggestions. I'm going to group a couple of questions that we have around the balance. So, we don't want to, this idea of you can be anything versus you have to be everything. But also knowing that as parents, we do want to encourage, we do want to motivate. What does that look like when it's a healthy encouragement, a healthy motivation, where you want to support them to achieve goals, where there's an important test coming up and you don't want to say, like, oh, well, it doesn't matter, don't stress about that. How, as a parent, do you, to use the excellent words in the question, nudge them towards better outcomes or towards that success without putting extra pressure on them that they may already be feeling themselves?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, right? And that's the art of this, is nudging them without grinding them into the ground. So it's going to be, you're going to have to use your judgment. I think like as a baseline, you want to make sure your child understands that self-care is important, right? That you want them to get sleep, you want them to get exercise, you want them to have connection with their friends, and you have an expectation that like their job is to go to school. Their job is to go to school, their job is to do their homework. Like I want to be clear that I don't want anyone to mistake what I'm saying for like an excuse to not work. Like you live in this family, like you're expected to do your work. And if you're not doing it, then we need to talk about why and get you the support that you need, but that's your job. And there might be some hard assery that's needed in that conversation, right? I mean, if we're talking about a kid who needs a nudge as opposed to a kid who needs to be walked back from the overwork, I think you get really clear. I also think you talk about the why. What's the deeper why of the work? So for example, just, I don't mean to be like in my house, but just like one thing you could say is, listen, I want you to be able to do whatever it is you want to do in this life. Whatever it is you decide to do, you're not going to be able to make that choice if you don't work hard now. Okay. So whatever it is you want to do in this world to make a difference, to whatever your passion is. So in other words, you're not saying, I want you to succeed so that you can make money. I want you to succeed so that you can have a great job. What you focus on is their sense of purpose. I want you to do whatever is meaningful to you. You're not going to be able to do it unless you work hard. And you say, thirdly, tell me what you need that you don't have in order to do the work that you need to do. How can I support you in that? Do you need help with self-regulation and executive functioning? Do you need help with managing your time? Like, how can we get you the support that you need? Because you're an Elmwood student. So there's a ton of support that's available, and you don't have to make it like a problem. You just say like, look, everybody needs support at different points. Like, what's missing here? Let's figure it out. But I would stay away from the extrinsic, meaning like you got to do well so that you can make money or you can go to a good college. Because for most of them, it's either, if it's not already driving them, it's probably not going to like turn on in that moment.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. That balance piece, I think it is going to be individual to every family, every child. Those are really good tips to kind of keep a
Megan, is that just me?
So there is another question here around, right now we have a real emphasis on busyness, on like our lives are busy. Now, obviously with the pandemic, busyness has changed somewhat, but I think the question here is referring to like success being tied to constantly being busy, moving to the next thing, go, 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 which I think a lot of our families experience in a normal, in normal times. And is there a way to instill qualities of kind of patience and slowing things down that might tie into addressing some of the feeling of not being enough? Have you seen any of that in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that what I said about appreciating the process can help people unhook from that go, go, go constant need for results. Like if you can really adopt an appreciation for the messiness, the messy part of life, if you can try to cultivate a sense of like, of gratitude, even for the moments when things aren't working very well, then I think you're unhooking from that constant striving for efficiency and effectiveness. And I really can't emphasize enough what it will do for your daughter if you can teach her to appreciate mistakes and you can teach her to appreciate the mess. I really can't overstate, because ultimately one of the problems with raising kids in elite environments is, I was just talking about this yesterday, and I've written about this for Time Magazine, is that we give them the impression that if they only work hard enough, they should be able to achieve anything. And the reality is that's just not true. In fact, there will be times when they hit a wall, and everything that they've done, and you know this as an adult, you can do everything in your power. You can try your very hardest and you still fall short. what's going to happen to the kids who are constantly anchoring or indexing on the need for efficiency, and the families as well. I mean, how many independent movies have you watched about this? That when the wall is hit, there's no resources, right? No one knows how to manage it because there's only been this constant sense of needing to always perform, and always that excellence was always the source of value. So you can start now, tonight, talking about what mistakes have taught you. You can start tomorrow, the next bad thing that happens, acknowledging what you learned from it, acknowledging the meaning that came from the mess, because that is how they learn how to make meaning from their own mess. There's nothing wrong with telling them that sometimes things just don't go your way. You know who does learn that? Populations like kids with learning differences learn that. Marginalized groups of people learn that because they know that the system doesn't work for them very early on. It's the elite kids who have all of the like potential opportunities in front of them. Those are the ones who struggle when they hit the wall because nobody told them it was coming. So really consider the importance of what I'm saying here, because this is the kind of resilience that will truly make them successful, not the constant leaning towards excellence.
That makes sense. Thank you. I'm going to squeeze in one more question here that is around parents who themselves may be feeling, you mentioned this idea of fatigue during the pandemic, and how, you might just kind of from the uncertainty, from the extra stress, and if as a parent you're feeling very low energy, but listening to you, there's a need to engage in the right way, and kind of be there to support the girls and to support our children. Do you have any suggestions for parents who might themselves be feeling that fatigue and yet wanting to give to their children and be there for them? Is there, are there things that parents can be doing to also kind of try to regain energy that might be needed for these conversations?
Yeah, I pause because it's hard. It's really hard. It's really hard. Talk about hitting the wall, right? I'm sure many of you have hit the wall yourselves at different times during this past year. I do think self-compassion is really important. And self-compassion means being an ally to yourself when you are suffering, giving yourself the same kindness that you would give to someone that you love. And so talking to yourself, first of all, it's really 3 steps. One, when you're hurting and when you're struggling, when you're tired, just validating how you feel, empathizing with yourself. So you don't judge yourself. God, why can't I get my motor going? Got to get some more caffeine, pull yourself together. But instead you say, I'm tired, and it makes sense that I'm tired, right? Just empathy with yourself. The second step is talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you care about. How would you comfort your best parent friend if they told you what they were struggling with? You would probably be way nicer to them than you're being to yourself. So you talk to yourself the way that you would talk to a close friend. And I got to tell you, I have to lean on this a lot. These 3 steps, by the way, have been very rigorously researched, and have proven to be enormously powerful in alleviating stress and increasing resilience. So that second step is talk to yourself the way you talk to a close friend. And the third step is think of somebody who else like you who might be suffering this way. Because when we think I'm the only one, our shame, our desire to isolate really goes through the roof, and we don't recover, right? We feel worse. So you just remind yourself, there are so many parents like me right now, right? I'm not the only one. And those 3 steps, just, it's okay to feel what I'm feeling. Just share your feelings with yourself, talk to yourself the way you would talk to a close friend, and remind yourself you're not alone. That can sometimes be enough just to give yourself the grace to pause so that you can recharge in order to move on.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much. We are at the end of our time with you, Rachel, and I want to say it's felt like I've spent an hour with a friend. You are a friend to Elmwood and to our whole community. You're so warm, and your sense of humor, and you're personable with your stories and sharing so much from your work and your research. And I just thank you so much for giving to us tonight and helping us to understand our girls more and know how we can better support them and support ourselves as well. So I really appreciate you being with us. It's been a wonderful evening spent with you. And I want to remind our Elmwood families to keep an eye post for our Schoology posts, because we will be sharing the recorded version of this webinar. And we will also be hosting a post-event discussion based on your book, Enough as She Is, as well as on this webinar, where parents can come together on Thursday evening to chat and share a little bit more. So anyone who maybe didn't have a chance to ask their question or to share ideas and strategies can keep an eye out for that. So we look forward to continuing our friendship with you, Rachel, as we move forward. And I'm sure we will have you back to Elmwood sometime when you can actually come in person. And thank you again so much. And thank you to everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Elmwood. Take care.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.